I watched them turn their backs on me, so I made sure they'd never find me again. I grew up in Glenville, Pennsylvania, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White siding, a flagpole on the porch, my mom's flower beds neat and full of those bright red geraniums she loved so much. On the surface, we were the picture of suburban respectability. My mom was the local school principal, always dressed sharp and walking with that confident clip that made people listen when she talked. My stepdad, well, he was ex-military, a quiet guy who worked at the DMV and had a permanent crease between his eyebrows like life itself annoyed him. I was 13 when Lily came into our house. She was 6, adopted with much fanfare, and overnight, everything shifted. One day, I was the kid with the straight A's and the science fair trophies, the one teachers said had potential. The next, I was the older brother, not just in title, but in responsibility. I remember sitting at the dinner table that first week, watching as my mom helped Lily cut her chicken into tiny bites, her voice syrupy and soft in a way I hadn't heard before. My plate was already cleared, washed, and drying by the time they were still laughing about whatever cute thing Lily had said. That was just the beginning. As the years passed, Lily became the gravitational center of our house. Everything bent toward her: holidays, conversations, even the way my mom decorated the living room. Her drawings were everywhere, taped up like museum pieces, while my framed soccer photos slowly got replaced or stored in boxes. I wasn't jealous at first, not really. I just figured I'd grown up, that the attention naturally shifted when there's a younger sibling in the house. That's what they always say in books and family sitcoms, right? But this wasn't some harmless reroute of affection. It was a reassignment. Lily didn't just join the family, she became it. I started hearing things like, "Derek, can you help Lily with her science project?" Which meant do the whole thing because she doesn't want to. Or, "Derek, your sister's had a hard day," which meant don't talk back when she snaps at you or breaks your stuff. If I ever pushed back, even gently, I was accused of being cold or distant, or, my personal favorite, resentful. As if I hadn't spent years earning my place in the family, only to watch it get handed to someone else like a favor. It wasn't just the favoritism, it was the revisionism. My accomplishments got folded into the background noise of Lily's growth. When she got into her performing arts high school, my mom posted about it for a week straight, calling her the light of our lives, our miracle. When I got into Penn State, she mentioned it in passing. No photo, no post, no card. Just a, "That's nice, honey," before she started telling me Lily's latest audition story. I became the background. That's the best way to describe it. Present, but never the focus. Reliable, but never celebrated. I was the extra pair of hands, the one who stayed late to help move furniture, the one who picked Lily up from practice when mom got held up at a PTA meeting, the one who quietly absorbed the burden of being the firstborn without any of the warmth that used to come with it. And the guilt, they never said it, but it was there, baked into every interaction. Like it was my fault if Lily cried, or failed a class, or had a fight with her friends. Like I was supposed to protect her from the world, and maybe from herself. And when I couldn't, when she spiraled or stormed off, it was always, "Why didn't you do something?" Never, "Why did she act like that?" I learned to disappear gracefully. I stopped bringing things up. Stopped expecting recognition or fairness or anything resembling what I saw other kids get from their parents. I became the dependable one, the one who didn't make waves. It was easier than being reminded, again and again, that in this house, there was one person who mattered more. One whose presence drew out softness, concern, pride, and one whose only job was to make sure the whole system kept running smoothly. I was Derek, the responsible one, the older brother, the background. It started slow, like a leak behind the walls you don't notice until the whole place reeks of mildew. I think the first time was over $20 missing from mom's purse. I remember coming home from school, tossing my backpack down, and finding them both in the kitchen, mom tight-lipped, arms crossed, my stepdad staring at the counter like there was something profound in the wood grain. Lily was already crying, sitting on the bar stool, her little hands balled into fists like she was the victim of some great injustice. "I know it was Derek," she said, sniffing. "He was the only one here when I left for school." I was 15, old enough to be angry, too young to understand that truth didn't matter anymore, not in our house. I tried to explain, said I hadn't touched anything, hadn't even gone near the counter. But it didn't matter. My mom didn't even look at me. Just told me to go to my room, told me she was disappointed, like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. My stepdad didn't say a word, just nodded with that same grim approval he reserved for court sentences and strict military codes. I sat in my room the rest of the night while Lily got pizza and a stuffed animal to help her calm down. I got to hear them laughing through the floorboards. After that, it became a routine. The broken vase on the hall table, Derek knocked it over when he was mad. The laptop that mysteriously stopped working? Derek must have been using it without permission. Lily said so, and that was enough. Every time something went missing, every time there was a mess, an accident, a moment of household inconvenience, Lily's finger found me before the dust even settled. And every time, without fail, my mom would take her word for it like it was gospel. No questions, no pauses, just that same heavy judgment in her eyes, like I was a disappointment she was forced to keep under her roof. It didn't matter what I said. I could bring up timelines, explain where I was, offer logic, but none of it mattered. The narrative had already been written. Lily was the wounded one, the fragile miracle, and I was the boy who needed to be corrected. At first, I fought back, tried to defend myself, raise my voice, plead. But it only ever made things worse. My mom would say I was being defensive, which somehow confirmed my guilt in her eyes, like innocence was supposed to look calm and apologetic even when you were being lied about in your own home. My stepdad would sigh, rub his temples like my words were just static, then mutter something about respect and rules and keeping the peace. Punishments came quick and quiet, grounded for weekends, no phone, no car keys. I once missed a school field trip I'd been saving for because Lily said I slammed the bathroom door and scared her. That was it. No damage, no actual proof, just her word and my mom's tired expression as she told me I should know better by now. Lily, meanwhile, got comforted like a war hero coming back from battle. Little rewards appeared after each incident. A new hoodie, an upgraded phone case, extra privileges, a night out with mom for girl time. She got to be the victim. I got to be the lesson. By the time I turned 17, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. I just stopped. Stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped asking why no one ever gave me the benefit of the doubt. Silence became the only thing I had left. My voice was just fuel for their fire, proof that I was ungrateful, angry, difficult. So I let it all roll over me. I took the blame, the punishments, the slights. I learned how to hold my breath emotionally, let everything sink deep so it wouldn't show on my face. My silence became my armor, cold, invisible, and airtight. The house felt colder after that. Not physically, but in that way where you know a place is no longer safe. I kept my head down, kept my distance, learned how to move quietly through my own home like a guest overstaying his welcome. They stopped asking about my life, and I stopped offering. No one noticed when my grades slipped, when I stopped bringing friends around, when I sat through dinner with a blank stare and an untouched plate. I existed in the negative space between their lives. Always there, always responsible, but never really seen. Lily flourished in that space. With no one to challenge her stories, she stretched her role into something bigger, more dramatic. The more she cried, the more they adored her. And the more they adored her, the smaller I became. It was like being erased while still walking around the house, still setting the table, still taking out the trash, still doing everything right, while everyone else looked at me like I was the reason everything was wrong. It was spring of '92 when everything finally collapsed. I was 18, just a few weeks from graduation, already accepted to a state college up north with a part-time job at the auto shop and a plan to save up for a used truck before summer. Things weren't good at home. I hadn't expected them to be for years, but I'd figured I could hold out a little longer, finish school, and disappear with whatever scraps of self-respect I had left. I never imagined that Lily would do what she did. Not because she was incapable of lying. I knew better than anyone how easily she twisted stories to suit herself. But because this lie wasn't just about getting me grounded or missing a weekend out with friends. This one was nuclear. It happened on a Tuesday. I came home from work and barely got my boots off before my mother was in the hallway, her face pale and tight, like she'd just stepped out of a funeral. She didn't ask where I'd been, didn't say hello, just stood there like a wall and said, "Go to your room." Now, her voice had that clipped, brittle edge I'd come to know too well, like glass on the verge of cracking. My stepfather was already sitting at the kitchen table, jaw clenched, hands steepled under his chin like he was holding back a verdict. I didn't know what it was about yet. I just knew it was bad. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like an hour, staring at the carpet, listening to voices from the other side of the wall, my mom's sharp and urgent, Lily's soft and sniffly, like someone reciting a script they half believed. When they finally came in, my mom didn't look at me. She stood just inside the doorway, hands crossed over her chest, and said the words like she was reading them off a cue card. Lily told us what happened. I didn't know what she meant. Not really. My mind went blank. Then my stepdad's voice, flat, lethal, cut through the silence. She says you touched her, that you've been inappropriate with her. She told your mother everything. Everything. Like there was anything to tell. I don't remember the exact words I said after that. I think I stood up too fast. I think I said something like, What the hell are you talking about? But it was already too late. The moment Lily said it out loud, it didn't matter what was real. There was no pause, no benefit of the doubt. There was just accusation and punishment and silence where a question should have been. I tried to speak, to say it wasn't true, that I'd never laid a hand on her, never even been alone with her behind closed doors, but my mother wouldn't let me finish. Don't, she said, shaking her head, her eyes shining with something too cold to be grief. Just don't. We trusted you. It didn't take long for the whole town to know. Glenville was small, the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked and knew what time their neighbors took their trash out. There weren't charges filed, at least not then, but that didn't stop the rumors from moving faster than I could breathe. The school called me into the office the next morning. I sat across from the principal, Mr. Monroe, a man who'd once written me a college recommendation letter, and watched his face twist with discomfort as he explained that they had to protect the learning environment. That I was being suspended pending investigation, which in Glenville meant expelled. My locker was cleared by the end of the day. My senior prom ticket was refunded. My name was scrubbed from the graduation program like I'd never existed. My girlfriend, Emily, dumped me that night. I called her to explain, to tell her I didn't do anything, that it wasn't true, that I would never. She didn't even let me finish the sentence. My parents won't let me see you, she said, voice shaking. They think I'm in danger. I'm sorry I can't. I just can't. By the end of that week, I was living out of a duffel bag. The final nail came the night my parents sat me down in the living room. If you can call standing 3 feet away while holding the door open, sitting me down. My mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore, like I was some strange man who'd wandered into her house by mistake. We can't support this, she said. Not with everything going on. You need to leave. No fight. No trial. No proof. Just words. Words from a 12-year-old and a mother who had been waiting for a reason to believe the worst about me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I took my duffel bag, the one with a few shirts, some cash, and the little gold watch my grandfather had given me before he died, and I walked out into the night with nowhere to go and no one to call. I didn't even bother taking the photo of me and Emily at the lake or the sketch pad I'd filled over the years. What was the point? I hitched a ride out of town that night with a long-haul trucker who was heading west. Told him I was headed to Cleveland for a job, which wasn't true. I had no job, no plan, just the understanding that whatever life I thought I had in Glenville was dead and buried. I spent the first few nights sleeping in bus stations and alleyways, eventually landing outside an old Baptist church that ran a shelter program in the basement. I told them my name was Cole. Just Cole. The pastor didn't ask questions. He just showed me the cot in the back and told me I could stay if I didn't bring trouble. I worked nights after that, anything I could find. Janitor shifts, unloading freight, mopping grease off kitchen floors in a 24-hour diner that paid cash under the table. I kept my head down, learned how to disappear into the world. No friends, no calls, no one asking if I was okay. And for a long time, I didn't even think I deserved anyone asking. It's strange how quiet the world gets when your name becomes a rumor, when the people who once knew you best stop saying it out loud. You start to forget who you were. You stop correcting people when they mispronounce it. You stop looking in mirrors long enough to recognize the man staring back. You just keep moving, one night job to the next, one breath after another. Like staying invisible is the only thing keeping you alive. The rest of the 90s blurred together like one long, gray hallway with no doors. I drifted from job to job, town to town, picking up whatever shifts I could get and never staying in one place long enough to leave a footprint. There were months I lived out of a storage unit in Akron, showering at a YMCA and eating instant noodles cold from the pack. Just to save on gas for the space heater, I kept hidden behind some broken lawn chairs. I painted houses in Indiana, cleaned floors in Pittsburgh, washed dishes in Cincinnati. Anything that paid cash and let me keep my head down. I rented basement rooms from strangers who didn't ask questions, sometimes splitting walls with 5 other guys in houses that smelled like mold and regret. If I saved anything, it was out of instinct, not hope. I didn't make friends. I didn't talk about where I came from. I told people my family moved out west or that I'd grown up overseas, anything to keep the past from creeping back through the cracks. I built my life like a survival shelter, quiet, low to the ground, never drawing attention. I stopped celebrating birthdays, stopped marking holidays, stopped thinking about the version of me that once believed in anything other than getting through the next week without losing everything again. It wasn't a life. It was a sentence. But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to be anything but alone. Then in 2001, I met Rachel. It happened in the most ordinary way, through work. I was managing inventory at a regional supply warehouse outside Columbus, and she worked the front desk part-time while taking night classes in medical billing. She was warm without being nosy, curious without prying. She had this way of laughing with her whole face, like she wasn't embarrassed to feel things out loud. I'd been invisible for so long, I didn't even notice she was looking at me until one afternoon, she brought me coffee on her lunch break and said, "You know, you don't always have to eat alone." I didn't know how to respond. I hadn't sat across from someone and talked about anything that mattered in years. But she kept showing up, softening the edges of my world without demanding anything in return. Little by little, I let her in. I told her where I'd worked, what I liked, how I had once wanted to be an architect before everything fell apart. She didn't push for more, just listened and smiled and told me that I was smarter than the job gave me credit for. We started seeing each other outside of work, dinners at diners, walks through the park. The first time she kissed me, I flinched, not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't remember what it was like to be touched by someone without fear. She didn't pull away. She just took my hand and waited. For the first time since I was 18, I let myself believe I could maybe build something again. That I wasn't just some half-life waiting to be dragged back into the past. That maybe, just maybe, someone could see me without seeing what everyone else thought they knew. But good things never last, not for people like me. It always comes back. It was a Sunday afternoon, nearly a year into us being together. We were sitting on her couch, the light filtering in soft and yellow through her apartment window, and out of nowhere she asked about my family. Not in a pointed way, just soft curiosity, like she'd earned the right to wonder. I tried to dodge it, made some joke about being the black sheep, but she pressed gently, saying she wanted to know more about me. So I told her, carefully, in pieces. I didn't give her everything. I couldn't. But I told her about Lily. About the accusation. About how things ended. I watched her face change as I spoke. Not dramatically, not like she was disgusted or afraid, but like something small had cracked open and she couldn't put it back together the same way. She didn't accuse me of anything. She didn't yell. She just nodded slowly and said, "That's a lot." Her voice was quiet, measured, like she was trying to stay neutral. But the silence after that was different. It had shape. It had weight. I knew it. I'd lived inside it before. She never said she didn't believe me. But she never said she did, either. The distance grew slowly after that. We still went out, still laughed, still touched each other with care. But it changed. There was always something unspoken sitting between us. A flicker of caution in her eyes that wasn't there before. The kind of doubt you can't unring once it's been voiced, even if it's never spoken again. And I couldn't live with that. Not again. I couldn't go through watching someone flinch internally every time they looked at me. I couldn't risk the whisper of another accusation echoing through the life I'd barely begun to piece together. So I left. I didn't say goodbye. I packed my things while she was at work, left her a note thanking her for the good days, for the warmth, for making me feel human again, even for a little while. I didn't explain why. I didn't need to. She'd already guessed it. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough of it to know I wasn't someone you could build a future with, not safely. I took the bus to Chicago that night. Started over again. Different job, different name on the lease, different version of me. I didn't look back. I never do. It showed up in the middle of April, tucked between a credit card offer and a pizza flyer. No return address. Just my name printed in looping cursive that looked like it hadn't touched paper in years. I stood in the hallway outside my apartment, holding the envelope like it might burn. It was thin, light, the kind of thing you expect to be either junk or trouble. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, torn at the edge like it had been ripped from a notebook, the handwriting shaky but unmistakably hers. "Your stepfather is dying. Mom wants to see you. Lily is sorry." That was it. No signature. No number. No apology, not really. Just 3 sentences like a hook thrown into the dark, hoping I'd bite. I stared at it for a long time. 21 years of silence. And that was what brought them back. Not a wedding. Not a funeral. Not even an actual apology. Just some vague acknowledgement that the ground had shifted. I should have thrown it away. I should have burned it, flushed it, fed it to the same silence they'd handed me when they locked the door behind me all those years ago. But I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe they could be human again. That time had worn down the edges of whatever hatred they'd clung to. Maybe I just wanted to see it for myself. The deathbed, the hollowed-out man, the wreckage that followed in the wake of everything they'd done. Maybe I just wanted to see if Lily could look me in the eye. So I went. I took the bus, same as I had back in '92, riding through 5 hours of Midwest spring thaw and unfamiliar towns until I reached the edge of the state line. Glenville hadn't changed much. Same blinking traffic light at the corner of Main and Cedar. Same gas station with the crooked price sign. Same houses with the same tired faces behind curtains that didn't know whether to open or hide. The house was still there. Still white. Still pretending. I remember stepping onto the porch like it might collapse under me, feeling my hand hover over the doorknob for a second too long. I half expected the door to swing open before I knocked, for someone to tell me it was a mistake, that the letter had never been sent. But instead, the door eased open like it had been waiting. And there they were. My stepfather was in the backyard, standing over the grill, spatula in hand, humming to himself like he'd just won a raffle. Not a hospital bed, not tubes, not even a chair. Just cargo shorts, a tank top, and a beer sweating in the grass beside his lawn chair. Lily was on the patio, barefoot in a sundress, a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other, laughing at something on the screen. I stood there, backpack still slung over my shoulder, throat thick with dust, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd read the letter wrong. Maybe there was another house, another man dying, another mother who wanted to make things right. Then my mom stepped out from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel like this was some kind of welcome home scene. "Well," she said, smiling like nothing had ever happened. "There he is." I didn't move. Lily looked up then, raised her glass, and said, "It was a good joke, wasn't it?" That's when it hit me. The whole thing, every word of that letter, every bit of that shaky handwriting, was a setup. A surprise, she called it later. A clever way to bring the family back together. Because apparently, a fabricated terminal illness and a forged olive branch were the only tools they had left. They wanted me back not out of guilt or love or even regret. They needed something. They needed help. They wanted money or caretaking or someone to fix the roof or drive mom to appointments or babysit Lily's kid. I don't even know. I stopped listening after that first laugh. That high, sharp sound Lily made when she said my name like it still belonged to her. I didn't say a word. I dropped the backpack on the porch and walked back down the steps. I didn't turn around when Mom called after me or when my stepfather said, "Don't be dramatic." I didn't give Lily the satisfaction of hearing my voice. They wanted me back in that house. They just forgot they burned it down. They didn't ask me to stay. They told me. After the little backyard performance, the grill, the wine, the joke they all pretended was harmless, I started to turn away, ready to vanish again, but my mother blocked the path like she had rehearsed it. "Let's not do this again," she said, her voice stiff and brittle, like politeness stapled over resentment. "We're family. We need to stick together now." I didn't have money. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a lease waiting for me anywhere else. Just a duffel bag with a few changes of clothes and a phone with 9% battery and no service plan. That was their window. That was all they needed. The garage was where they put me. Not the guest room. Not the den. The garage. They cleared out a corner between the old mower and Lily's boxes of vintage Halloween decorations. I got a cot and a bare bulb that flickered if I ran the space heater too high. The walls were thin, the air colder than the outside in winter, hotter in summer, and the smell of gasoline and mildew never left. There was no privacy, just a curtain nailed to the ceiling joists and a rule that I keep my space tidy, so it wouldn't embarrass them if company peeked inside. They started adding bills to my name before I even realized it. At first, it was the Wi-Fi. Mom said it would be easier to set it up under someone younger. Then the water bill. Then electric. Then a joint credit card Lily said was just for emergencies. My name started showing up in envelopes I hadn't opened. One day I checked my credit and saw 3 new accounts opened in my name in the past 6 months. 2 of them were maxed out. I tried to bring it up, tried to explain that my credit was the only thing I had left, that I needed to be able to rebuild something, anything. But Lily just blinked at me and said, "Oh my God, it's not like we're buying a mansion," then walked off mid-conversation to film herself dancing in the kitchen for TikTok. She was always on that thing. Every day, it was some new sound clip, some new trend, her face contorting into whatever emotion the algorithm liked best. I ignored it until I couldn't. One night, I made the mistake of checking her profile. She had tens of thousands of followers. And buried in between the makeup hauls and wellness reels were the stories, the healing journeys, she called them. Grainy, low-lit clips where she sat on her bed with a faux tear in her eye, talking about the trauma of growing up with an older brother who hurt me, how she had forgiven him because that's what survivors do, how she had to share this to help others. She never used my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone local knew. Half the comments were from people we'd gone to school with, some praising her courage, some asking, "Is this about who I think it is?" One said, "She's so brave to let him live in the garage after all that." That one nearly made me throw the phone across the wall. I confronted her once, asked her how she could keep saying those things, knowing what it cost me, knowing what she did. She didn't even look up from her screen. "I'm processing," she said. "That's part of my therapy. You wouldn't understand." Then she added, like it was some kind of sick olive branch, "Besides, I said I forgave you. Forgave me. For something that never happened. For a lie she built an entire identity on. And now it had likes and views and monetization. Every time I tried to leave, my mother pulled the same line. "We're finally a family again, Derek, don't ruin this. She said it like I owed them. Like exile and slander and being fed to the wolves was just some youthful misstep we'd all gotten over. And any protest I had, about the bills, about the TikToks, about being used, was dismissed as bitterness. She'd say, "You've always had trouble letting things go," as if that was the problem, not the fact that my life had been chewed down to a paycheck and a cot in a room with no windows. They used me. Every grocery run, every oil change, every late payment they needed to cover. They leaned on me like a structure they hated but couldn't afford to tear down. I paid for the power that lit up the living room where they sat every night. I paid for the gas that let Lily take weekend trips to relax her nervous system. I paid the minimums on the cards they racked up under my name and never once asked if I was okay, or how I was sleeping in that damp garage, or what it felt like to wake up every morning knowing I was one mistake away from being homeless again. That wasn't family. That was captivity with a smile. They called it togetherness. I called it debt with blood ties. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the mail came late, and the box was already overflowing by the time I pulled the bundle out and started flipping through it on the hood of my car. A credit union envelope caught my eye, plain white, thick paper, no logo. At first, I thought it was another balance notice or a duplicate statement, something annoying but manageable. But when I opened it, everything inside me went still. There it was. A promissory note. $22,000. My name printed, signed, dated. The signature looked close, damn close, but it wasn't mine. My handwriting was blocky, slow, like someone who learned to write late and never fixed it. This one had loops. A little flourish. Someone trying to copy something they'd only seen secondhand. I felt the paper sweat in my hands. Read it once. Then again. The loan had been processed 6 weeks earlier. The money had already moved. The cosigner field? Blank. Because they didn't need one. My credit was still just good enough. My address was still valid. And they had everything they needed to pull it off. I knew who it was. I didn't even need to ask. I stood in the driveway for maybe 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to keep my vision clear. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even shock anymore. It was confirmation. This was never going to stop. They were never going to stop. And I wasn't going to be able to fix it, or outlast it, or reason my way back to some imagined middle ground where things got better. They had carved me hollow and kept carving. And I'd let them. Over and over again. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited. I listened to the usual sounds. The TV muttering down the hallway, Lily's bedroom door creaking open for a midnight snack, the bathroom faucet dripping even after I'd fixed it twice. At 3:12 a.m., the house finally went still. I laid there on the cot, heart thudding against the insulation, until I was sure it was real silence and not the kind they used before they struck. I got up. Quiet. Slow. No lights. I took only what was mine. My worn canvas backpack, the folder where I kept my ID, my birth certificate, the last paycheck I'd cashed. A small bundle of clothes, no more than I could carry without drawing eyes. I found my phone, pulled the SIM card, snapped it in half with my teeth, and flushed it down the toilet. I left the phone itself on the kitchen counter, screen up, next to the empty coffee pot and the dirty mugs no one ever washed. I didn't write a note. I didn't know one. By sunrise, I was gone. I bought the van off a guy in rural Indiana who ran a salvage yard out of his backyard. $900 cash, no title, no plates. It barely turned over, and the brakes felt like a prayer, but it ran. I drove north for a while, then west, then nowhere in particular. I slept in the back seat at truck stops, bought gas in cash, ate drive-through burgers in silence. Somewhere outside Des Moines, I picked a name, Ray. It felt simple, clean, like a name that had never been spat across a dinner table or whispered behind a closed door. By the time I crossed into Idaho, the van had started to sputter on hills, and the heater only worked when I kicked the console hard enough. But it was mine. No one had the keys but me. No one knew where I was, or what I was calling myself, or how far I'd gone. For the first time in years, I breathed and it didn't taste like debt. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew it wasn't back. Not ever again. From 2014 to 2024, I existed without leaving a trace. No address anyone could find, no name anyone would recognize, no number that rang if dialed. I rented a dented aluminum trailer park behind an abandoned storage facility 3 miles off a highway no one traveled, unless they were lost or desperate. The gravel cracked under your boots when you walked to the mailbox, and in the winter the wind pushed through the insulation like it wanted to remind you you didn't belong. Which was fine. I didn't. I worked at a small car repair shop on the edge of a nowhere Idaho town that didn't ask for W-2s or references. The boss was a retired guy with one lung and a fading memory, and he paid cash at the end of every week in a creased envelope that always smelled faintly of oil and chewing tobacco. I showed up, fixed things, didn't talk much. I was good with engines. Better with silence. I did break jobs, rebuilt carburetors, welded rusted frames back to something that passed for safe. I never gave my last name. No one asked. No social media. No digital footprint. Not even a phone with GPS. I bought burner flip phones for emergencies, kept them turned off and buried in a drawer under a stack of old service manuals. I paid for groceries in cash, drank coffee out of thermoses I never washed, and didn't speak unless I had to. No one knew where I slept. No one visited. No one asked about the past, because I didn't give them the rhythm to follow. I was polite, predictable, and absent. Once a year, on the same dull Thursday in early spring, I'd take the bus 2 towns over and walk to the county library. They had a row of old public-use computers behind a shelf of dusty encyclopedias. I'd sit down, plug in headphones with no sound, and open a browser in incognito mode. I'd type in the same thing every time. Missing Brother Glenville, Pennsylvania. Dozens of posts would pop up. Facebook, please copied to Reddit. Old blog entries with my high school photo. Grainy flyers reposted by stranger accounts. Some from Lily. Some from my mother. Some from people I didn't even know, calling me kind, confused, deeply missed. My brother disappeared, and no one has seen him in years. If you've seen Derek, please let me know. He's not dangerous. He's just hurt. Some were more polished, like they'd been written by PR consultants. My brother is missing. He left one night without a word. We just want to know he's safe. Please share. One had a slideshow. My face from senior yearbook. Then a picture of me as a kid, holding a fishing pole. Then a shot of the house in Glenville, taken in soft evening light like that had ever been a safe place. And beneath it all, the comments. Poor girl. She forgave him, and now he's vanished. Heartbreaking. Someone must have helped him disappear. Probably living under a new name. I hope she finds peace. No one deserves what she went through. Every time I saw those threads, that name, mine, but not anymore, I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. I would scroll until I couldn't read anymore. Then I'd clear the history, wipe the keyboard, and walk out without looking back. They wanted me found. Not to apologize. Not to repair anything. Just to drag me back into the story they'd written without me. I didn't belong in their world anymore. I wasn't Derek to anyone. And if they wanted to mourn a ghost, they could do it without interrupting the quiet I'd built. Because sometimes, disappearing isn't escape. It's survival. It was late January when the message came through. A friend. Not really a friend anymore. More like a flickering shadow from the old world. Send it through one of the encrypted lines we used back when I was changing names and cutting digital cords. I hadn't heard from him in almost 6 years. No greeting. No small talk. Just a screenshot and a line of text. Thought you should see this. VPN only. Don't reply. The screenshot was from Facebook. Lily's profile. I stared at it for a long time, heart steady in that slow, practiced rhythm I'd taught it over the years. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Just read it once, and again, until the whole thing sat flat and hollow in my chest. She wrote, "We just found out about a large inheritance left to our family. But unfortunately, without my brother's signature, we can't access the full amount. If anyone knows where he is, please help us. It's not about money. It's about family. We need him. I forgive him." I sat in the back of the shop on my break, the screenshot open on a cracked old burner screen, grease still under my nails, the smell of brake fluid thick in my throat. I felt nothing. Not at first. The land was real. I'd heard whispers about it before I disappeared, some leftover plot from my biological dad's side, out in a county no one cared about back then. They used it as hunting land once, nothing special. But now that the developers were pushing outward, it had shot up in value. $480,000, maybe more, depending on which contract got approved. It had been left to me, sole heir, still legally alive. They'd never filed a death certificate. Too inconvenient, too final. They needed the illusion of innocence in their story. So there it was. The reason for the sudden wave of digital grief. The desperate Reddit posts. The public apologies. The hollow forgiveness wrapped in pastel hashtags. It wasn't love. It wasn't redemption. It was paperwork. They didn't need me. They needed my name. My signature. The one thing they hadn't forged yet. The final key in the lock.